He asked me what I wanted. I jokingly said you. Then he took off his clothes. Under the flicker of the station's artificial dawn, I told myself today would be normal. Normal meant cataloging human behavior for the cultural archives, drinking a tepid cup of synthesized tea that tasted like melted wires, and, if fortune blessed me, avoiding another debate with my supervisor about how much ear twitching was unprofessional. My ears had a life of their own. They twitched when annoyed, perked when startled, and once even drooped so low during a budget meeting that someone tried to hang a note on them. The humans, of course, found this hilarious. Humans found everything hilarious, including my existence. They would mimic me behind my back, tugging their short ears like children pulling at rubber bands. I should have been insulted, but instead, I found myself strangely charmed. Or maybe that was just the tea poisoning me slowly. It was during one of these routine observations, me standing stiff with my data slate, while a group of humans argued passionately about which flavor of nutrient bar was the superior life choice, that it happened. He sat across from me, legs stretched too far, wearing the kind of grin that suggested either boundless confidence or a head injury. I asked the group what they wanted most, a standard icebreaker question for the record. He asked me back, "What do you want?" It should have been simple. I was supposed to say something safe, stable diplomacy, fewer clouds that tried to eat diplomats, a fresh uniform that didn't smell like recycled oxygen. But instead, the words tumbled out, reckless as a comet. You. Silence. A silence so vast it could have swallowed the station whole. My ears twitched violently, flapping like sails in a storm. I meant it as a joke, an experiment in humor, a cultural mimicry to bridge the gap. He tilted his head, studied me with those two human eyes, and then, oh stars, he began unfastening his jacket. "Wait," I said, my voice cracking like a misfired translator chip. "You're not, are you?" He was. He stood, peeled away layers with a calmness that made me question whether humans ever experience shame. The other humans burst into laughter, clapping and hooting, as if this were the grand finale of some elaborate performance I hadn't bought tickets to. My data slate beeped indignantly, asking if I wanted to record the behavior for research. I nearly threw it at the wall. "Are you serious?" I hissed, my ears pointing straight upward, which any of my people would have recognized as a scream of horror. "Dead serious," he said, standing there bare-chested, utterly unapologetic, his grin wide enough to outshine the station lights. "You said you wanted me." I pressed both hands over my face, ears poking between my fingers like traitors. This was not in the manual. There was no chapter in the archives labeled, "What to do when a human undresses because of your poorly timed joke." I glanced around, hoping anyone would intervene. Instead, the humans egged him on, chanting his name, pounding their hands against the cafeteria tables. I meant it figuratively. I finally blurted out, "Figuratively." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice in a mock whisper. Do aliens not believe in literal follow-through? My ears flopped sideways in despair. We believe in not undressing during diplomatic surveys. Oh, he said, as if this were a brand new concept, and then shrugged with a maddening casualness. Guess I'm just culturally adaptive. He picked up his discarded jacket and swung it back onto his shoulders, but too late. The damage was done. The moment had burned itself into memory. The humans around us would never let me live it down. They were still laughing when I left the cafeteria, ears trembling, face burning, muttering about resigning from the archives and starting a quieter life somewhere far away, like a black hole. Except he followed me. Not immediately, not in an obvious, stalker-like way, but later, as I tried to bury myself in reports about interspecies trade tariffs. There he was, leaning against my office doorway, still grinning as though we'd shared the universe's funniest joke. "You really didn't mean it?" he asked. "I absolutely did not mean it," I said, clutching my data slate like a shield. "You sounded like you meant it," he said. "Your ears did that twitchy thing. They twitch when I'm horrified or interested. I will have you escorted out." He laughed, the kind of laugh that rattled the walls of my careful detachment. I should have despised him for it. Instead, I found myself cataloging every detail, the curve of his smile, the cadence of his voice, the infuriating way he managed to turn my humiliation into a shared secret. That night, as I lay in my quarters, ears still twitching with remembered embarrassment, I realized two things. First, humans had no idea how to respect boundaries. And second, much worse, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted him to. The humans had a way of multiplying, not biologically, though judging by their unrestrained flirting habits, that too, but socially. One minute you encountered one, the next you were surrounded by them, each louder than the last, their conversations like overlapping engine noises. And ever since the cafeteria incident, it seemed no matter where I went, he was there, trailing along as though he'd been assigned to me by fate or some malevolent administrator with a cruel sense of humor. I told myself I could ignore him, focus on work, focus on my carefully structured notes about human customs, their obsession with beverages that altered consciousness, their habit of laughing when confused, their inability to stop pressing buttons labeled "Do Not Press." Unfortunately, he had learned how to exploit my distraction. Whenever I was deep into observation mode, there he would be, leaning too close, dropping comments that derailed my thoughts. "Cataloging us again?" he asked one morning as I typed up a report about human sleeping habits, which mainly involved blankets, noises, and arguments about temperature. "Yes," I said without looking at him, specifically documenting how humans refuse to sleep unless conditions are absurdly specific. He grinned. "Sounds like a complaint, not a report." "It is a scientific observation." He leaned closer. "And do your ears twitch when you make scientific observations?" My ears betrayed me by twitching. I jabbed at my slate. That was an involuntary muscular response. "Sure it was," he said. By midday, word of our exchange had spread. Humans gathered whenever I entered a room, waiting for the next ridiculous interaction. They treated me like part of a comedy duo I had never auditioned for. It was maddening. Yet, beneath the irritation, there was something strange. My people studied humans as if they were unstable stars, dangerous if approached incorrectly. But the chaos he brought, his jokes, his confidence, his refusal to back down, had a warmth that reminded me of something I'd forgotten existed. The warmth grew more complicated during our joint assignment. We were both selected to mediate a small dispute between two merchant species in the station's bazaar. One side accused the other of inflating prices by hiding tiny gravitational anomalies in their stalls. Normally, this would require calm negotiation, precise translation, and careful cultural sensitivity. Unfortunately, my human companion decided it also required jokes. "So you're telling me," he said to the indignant merchants, "that your fruit weighs more on their side of the market than it does on yours? That's not a scam. That's just good exercise." The merchants hissed. I nearly buried my face in my slate. "Please," I said quickly. "He is attempting humor. A very regrettable human practice." But then, somehow, impossibly, the merchants started laughing. Their laughter was high-pitched and screechy, echoing off the bazaar walls. They insisted his comment was clever. They even dropped the accusations and began haggling in good spirits. I was left stunned, ears twitching helplessly, as he gave me a smug little wink. Later, while we walked back through the glowing corridors of the station, I confronted him. "You sabotaged the negotiation protocol." "I saved the negotiation," he corrected, with charm. "You humiliated me." "You smiled," he said. I froze. I did not. "You did," he said, stepping closer. "Your ears gave you away." I tried to argue, but he was right. In that moment, I realized I had smiled without noticing, and worse, I didn't entirely regret it. That night, the station lights dimmed into simulated twilight. I sat in my quarters, staring at the reports I was supposed to file. Instead of working, I replayed the day's events, hearing his voice, seeing his grin, feeling the strange flutter in my chest. My people would call it weakness. The archives would call it contamination of observation. But I couldn't stop. The next day was worse. He arrived at the archives with a stack of nutrient bars. "Thought you might need these," he said, "for all your exhausting note-taking about us." I accepted one just to end the interaction, but when I bit into it, the flavor was startlingly good. "This is pleasant," I admitted cautiously. See, we're not all chaos. Sometimes we invent snacks. I try to maintain my composure. One palatable food source does not redeem an entire species. Give us time, he said, smirking. I wanted to laugh, and that was dangerous. If I let him keep making me laugh, I wasn't sure where it would end. The humans had a saying, falling for someone. I had never understood it. Falling implied loss of balance, risk, the certainty of pain. But now, as my ears betrayed me with every twitch and my carefully built detachment slipped further away, I began to wonder if falling wasn't inevitable. And if it was, perhaps the human wasn't such a terrible place to land. The station always felt louder when the council was in session. Delegates of every imaginable shape and size filled the grand chamber, their voices clashing like malfunctioning engines. I tried to focus on the task assigned to me, translating the more obscure dialects into coherent records, but my ears twitched with distraction. He was sitting 2 seats away, leaning back far enough in his chair that one wrong shift would send him tumbling into a representative from the Luran cluster. The Lurans did not take kindly to sudden physical contact. I prayed silently to every cosmic entity I didn't believe in that he would behave. Naturally, he didn't. Do you think they know their translator is stuck on loop? He whispered loudly, pointing at the insectoid delegate whose speech was echoing itself twice over. Yes, I hissed. And now everyone else knows as well. Congratulations. The insectoid paused mid-statement, swiveling its multifaceted eyes toward us. My ears flattened against my head. He only smiled and waved, as if we were at a casual dinner and not an interstellar council. Somehow, the council proceeded. My notes filled with details of trade disputes, mining rights, and accusations of sabotage. Beneath the noise, however, there was tension I couldn't ignore. The merchants we had pacified days earlier had not been isolated troublemakers. Whispers spread about human interference, about cultural destabilization, about how easily laughter could be turned into chaos. And in the middle of it all, there was him, human, smiling, stubborn, refusing to fade into the background. After the session, we walked together through the station's central corridor, where simulated daylight poured through massive panes of reinforced glass. Beyond the glass stretched the cosmos, a slow whirl of stars and distant planets. He nudged me with his elbow. You're twitching again, he said. I'm thinking, I replied. You're worried, he said, about them blaming us. They're not blaming us. They are blaming you. He chuckled. At least they noticed me. I stopped walking. This isn't a performance. He turned to me, grins softening. I know, but sometimes laughter disarms more than a weapon does. Maybe that's why they fear it. I wanted to argue, but part of me agreed. My people taught control, solemnity, the strict maintenance of distance, and yet the sound of laughter had dissolved anger in a way no decree ever could. Still, admitting that aloud felt too dangerous. Our debate was cut short when the corridor lights flickered. Then came the alarms. A tremor ran through the floor, rattling my teeth. The intercom crackled with warnings. Containment breach in the agricultural sector. Unauthorized interference detected. I bolted toward the source, ears alert, while he followed with reckless enthusiasm. The agricultural sector was chaos incarnate. A swarm of cloud beasts, levitating predators usually kept sedated, had escaped their enclosures. They drifted through the air like living storms, tendrils snapping at fleeing staff. One lunged toward a technician, who ducked too slowly. Without thinking, he grabbed a nutrient bar from his pocket and hurled it at the beast's gaping maw. Miraculously, the beast swallowed it whole, then hovered in confusion, tendrils twitching as though uncertain what to do with such an unexpected flavor. You bribed it with food? I shouted. Hey, it works on me, he shouted back. We sprinted together, dodging snapping tendrils and stray bolts of malfunctioning containment fields. My mind raced. The beasts responded to electrical impulses. Maybe I could recalibrate the environment controls to drive them back into their pens. But I would need time. Too much time. He noticed my hesitation. Tell me what to do. You wouldn't understand the schematics. Try me. I rattled off a series of instructions, expecting confusion. Instead, he sprinted to the control panel, fingers flying with the confidence of someone who had taken apart too many machines in his youth. Sparks flew. The beasts howled in distorted frequencies. And then, one by one, they drifted back into their enclosures as the recalibrated fields pulsed with steady rhythm. When the last containment door sealed shut, silence returned. My ears twitched wildly, this time in disbelief. "You read schematics?" I asked. "I tinker," he said, wiping soot from his hands. "Also, I once reprogrammed a vending machine to only give me the good bars." I laughed despite myself, a short, sharp sound I tried to swallow. He caught it instantly, his grin spreading. "See, progress." Before I could reply, the station security officers arrived, their expressions sharp. They demanded explanations, and though we told the truth, I could see suspicion simmering in their eyes. This wasn't just an accident. Someone wanted the beasts unleashed. Someone wanted humans implicated. Later, in the quiet of my quarters, I replayed the day's events. The laughter, the chaos, the way he stood without hesitation in the face of danger. My people would have called it reckless. I called it something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet. My ears twitched softly in the dark, and I realized I was no longer observing the human. I was orbiting him. The summit was supposed to be a controlled affair. Delegates from a dozen star systems had arrived to discuss trade accords, migration protocols, and, inevitably, which species had the loudest sneeze in the galaxy. I had prepared for every contingency. Or so I thought. The human, of course, had other plans. He appeared at the entrance of the council chamber, carrying what looked like a tote bag full of improbable objects. A translator drone that blinked erratically, several nutrient bars, and a small container labeled emergency humor. I glared. "You're not seriously bringing improvisation," he said, waving me off. "It's an art form. Or chaos. Close enough." Before I could protest further, the doors opened, and the delegates poured in. The first hour passed in standard protocol, the usual speeches, handshakes, and ritualized nodding. Then, without warning, an explosion of colored smoke erupted from the center of the chamber. A small drone had been hacked, releasing a cloud of pollen-like particles that made several delegates sneeze uncontrollably. Pandemonium ensued. I froze, ears twitching violently. Humans panicked, animals panicked, even the holographic recorders panicked. And then, predictably, he moved. He lunged toward the nearest control panel, twisting dials and tapping at touch screens. "Which one stops the sneeze cloud?" he shouted. "The containment field." I yelled. "Stabilize it, or everyone inhales." On it, he jabbed buttons with reckless precision. The sneeze cloud wavered, then collapsed into harmless glittering particles that rained onto the floor. Delegates sneezed once more, then looked around, confused, as if the danger had never existed. I pressed my hands to my ears. "You are infuriating." He grinned. "And effective. You're welcome." But the chaos was only beginning. The sabotage systems revealed a deeper plot. The summit had been targeted to destabilize interstellar relations. Negotiations stalled, accusations flew, and tempers flared. I could see the logic in fleeing to the archives and calling security, but he wasn't done. He activated the translator drone, which started spewing a nonsensical speech in every dialect simultaneously. Somehow, the delegates began laughing. One by one, their anger dissolved, replaced by curiosity and amusement. I blinked. "That's not protocol." "Who cares?" he said. "It works." By midday, the summit had become a bizarre blend of diplomacy and stand-up comedy. Delegates proposed accords between fits of laughter, misread insults turned into clever banter, and I realized, with growing horror, that he had turned a potential interstellar incident into a cooperative session. During a short break, I cornered him. "This is reckless beyond measure. Someone could be hurt." He popped a nutrient bar into his mouth. "They're not dead yet. Besides, I thrive under pressure." "You thrive under chaos," I corrected. "Same difference," he said, smirking. I sighed and looked around. The delegates were haggling over trade routes while giggling intermittently. My ears twitched against my skull, betraying my unwilling admiration. How could one human turn disaster into diplomacy so effortlessly? The real crisis hit when a second wave of sabotage was discovered. Someone had tampered with the environmental controls. The station's artificial atmosphere began fluctuating, creating microgravity pockets in the chamber. Papers, clothing, and a few smaller delegates floated helplessly. He grabbed my hand. "Come on," he said. "We fix this together." Together, I echoed, feeling the absurdity of holding his hand while dodging floating politicians. "Yes, together," he said, and somehow his grin made sense in defiance of gravity, alarms, and interstellar decorum. We worked side by side, me issuing precise commands, him improvising where the systems didn't respond. At one point, he used a snack bar to wedge a control lever into place, while delivering a joke about how zero-gravity snacks are the hardest to eat gracefully. I couldn't help but laugh, and my ears twitched involuntarily. By the time the atmosphere stabilized, the summit was still in session, albeit with delegates suspended midair in awkward poses. Somehow, everyone agreed to continue negotiations. Someone even proposed adding a clause about humans' creative problem-solving abilities. Later, in the quiet corridors of the station, we walked together, catching our breath. "You were insane," I said. "Effective," he corrected. "Insane and reckless," I insisted. He laughed, a sound that echoed down the empty hall, bouncing off walls with a cadence that somehow felt like music. "Maybe. But we're alive, aren't we?" "Yes," I admitted. "Barely." He stopped walking and looked at me. "You're laughing." "Ears tell me so." "They twitch involuntarily," I said. "You're enjoying this," he said. I glared. "I am not enjoying this." "You are," he said, grinning wide. "And admit it, this is the most fun you've had in weeks." I didn't answer. My ears twitched again, betraying me. For the first time, I realized I was no longer just observing him, no longer cataloging behavior as an objective alien. I was entangled in it. The chaos, the humor, the danger, it was infectious. And worse, I liked it. He tilted his head, as if reading the thoughts in my mind, and whispered, "Good, because we're not done yet." I wanted to groan. I wanted to scold him. Instead, I found myself following, ears twitching in reluctant anticipation. The station hummed with an uneasy calm. Delegates shuffled into the main hall for the final summit session, whispers of sabotage still lingering in the air. I scanned the crowd, ears twitching as my mind cataloged every subtle movement. Everything was prepared, protocols rechecked, contingencies aligned. I was ready, or so I thought. He appeared at my side, holding a small device that blinked erratically. "Emergency humor?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Always," he said, "and maybe a little chaos, just in case." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Do you ever plan anything serious?" Define serious. The first half hour passed in careful formality. Delegates spoke. Hands waved, notes were passed, and slowly the previous chaos seemed like a distant memory. Then the sabotage systems we had repaired began to malfunction again, deliberate this time. Gravity spikes, air fluctuations, and alarms turned the chamber into a mild obstacle course. Some delegates floated like startled clouds, papers spinning in zero-gravity spirals. I froze, instinctively reaching for the control panel. He grabbed my hand. "Together," he whispered. "Together." I echoed, irritated. "You're impossible." "Exactly," he said, grinning. "And watch this." He began improvising with the translator drone, tossing it between floating consoles to reset systems in midair. I issued precise commands, adjusting the environmental controls while dodging errant objects. Every time a gravity spike knocked a delegate sideways, he offered a running quip. "Mind the suit. It's not built for aerobatics." A few delegates actually laughed, suspended as they were, and the tense atmosphere became oddly cooperative. By mid-session, we had stabilized the systems. The saboteurs, finally identified as a rival merchant faction, attempted to intervene, only to be caught in a sequence of countermeasures we'd improvised. He had used a nutrient bar as a makeshift wedge. I had rerouted power through the secondary console, and together we had turned sabotage into a controlled spectacle. Delegates clapped, some laughed, and one of the insectoid representatives gave a slow, approving nod that I almost interpreted as gratitude. We walked through the aftermath, corridor lights reflecting off polished metal walls. "You're reckless," I said. "Effective," he corrected, again, like it was an immutable law of physics. "You're impossible," I said, shaking my head. "And you," he replied, tilting his head, "are smiling." "Ears confirm." My ears twitched. "They twitch involuntarily," I said, though I knew the lie was useless. "You're lying," he said softly, "and I like it." I stopped walking. "You're infuriating." "And yet," he said, stepping closer, "you keep following me." I swallowed, realizing it was true. I had begun this journey observing humans, studying their chaos, cataloging their folly. But now, I found myself orbiting one particular human who had turned my careful detachment into playful tension, my rigid discipline into reluctant laughter, my fear into something I did not want to name. The final session of the summit concluded with an unprecedented accord. Laughter had dissolved tension, practical jokes had revealed hidden solutions, and the rival faction was both humiliated and impressed. I stood beside him as delegates filed out, ears twitching, heart racing. My people would have called this inappropriate, destabilizing, chaotic. But I felt alive. He looked at me, expression soft. "So," he said, "all this chaos, did you enjoy it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I did. More than I expected." He smirked. "Good. Because I'm not done." I wanted to groan, to lecture him on proper conduct, on procedure, on the endless improbability of human logic. Instead, I felt a thrill of anticipation. My life had been orderly, structured, catalogued. He had shown me a universe where laughter solved problems, where courage included vulnerability, where desire could be unashamedly expressed and accepted. "I suppose," I said carefully, "that makes you predictably unpredictable." "Exactly," he said, and offered his hand. "So, want to see what other trouble we can get into?" I took his hand, letting my ears twitch freely for the first time without shame. Together, we walked toward the observation deck, where the stars stretched endlessly, and I realized I no longer wished to observe from a distance. I wanted to orbit him, to navigate the chaos, to live in the space between caution and abandon. The station continued its quiet hum around us. Somewhere, distant alarms muttered and translated into forgotten languages. Somewhere, the universe waited with infinite possibilities. And for the first time, I welcomed uncertainty with a laugh, and with him. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and absurdly wonderful. And so were we.